Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, live from our Pontchartrain Production Studios on a very, very rainy day here in New Orleans as we overlook the filthy Superdome roof, which I've talked about on my radio show and on social media. And come on, guys, we got to do better, right? National TV comes in last week. I know they're trying to get the logos up for Caesar, but yet again, still a filthy dome roof. I would think when companies come in, you want to clean up a little bit. Obviously, we didn't do it on Monday night. Hopefully, it'll be done before the season starts in a couple weeks. But nevertheless, got a great show in store for you here with Les East of CrescentCitySports.com and also Saturday Down South. We'll talk Saints, LSU, Tulane. Maybe sneak some Pelicans in there if we can, but it really is kind of a football show for you today. Les, welcome to the show. And I know you don't want to talk about the Superdome roof.
Well, maybe this rain will give them a head start on cleaning it up.
I was hoping it would, unless they got some guy up there that's got one of those scrubbing brushes. I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, probably not.
But it looks kind of weird. Okay? It definitely looks kind of weird, no doubt about it. Before we get started, tell the folks about what's going on, what you're doing. I know you're involved with CrescentCitySports.com, 106.1 FM with the Friday Night Football Show. Talk a bit about everything involved in.
Yeah, thanks. There's a lot going on. CrescentCitySports.com, of course, prep football's a big part of what we do, and that's going to be starting up for good next week. Jamboree's already underway, and Ken Trahan's been doing quite a few previews of schools, so there's a lot of catching up you can do on high school football there. And, of course, we'll have next Friday, beginning on Nash Icon 106.1, we'll have Ken's original prep football report. I'll host the pregame show from 6 to 7. He'll take over at 7 o'clock. Reports from all over the state. Most comprehensive scoreboard in the state. Now back to the website. A lot of Saints stuff, a lot of LSU and Tulane stuff. I'll have a series of stories leading up to the Saints opener, beginning probably on Labor Day, going right up till the kickoff. And LSU and Tulane next week will be building up to their openers on September 4th. And then for Saturday Down South, we're also ramping up with the SEC coverage. I've had some LSU stories, some SEC stories, and we'll have even more series of stories leading up to the UCLA game.
Also, you have a book that's out. Tell the folks about the book and how folks can find it.
Yeah, thanks. It's called Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes. It is a novel about politics and the media with some references to sports and how it sort of intertwines with those other entities. And it's available at all the major outlets on the web, Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com, or you can just Google the title, Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes, and find numerous ways to get it, either in ebook form or paperback.
Beautiful. Camp ends today for the New Orleans Saints. Pretty much, again, they've had suffered some injuries, which have really kind of set them back. We knew about Michael Thomas coming into camp. They waived punter Nolan Cooney this past week, which is no surprise because Gilligan looks like he's the punter. Marcus Willoughby, defensive end, was waived with an injury designation. Jalen Dalton, who was really having a good camp at defensive tackles, back on IR for the second straight year. I think last year was a bicep, this year it's a tricep. Ethan Greenrich is a guy that has been the backup tackle for Armstead for the last season or so. And of course, Brian Poole was brought in to be able to back up C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but also was a guy that was going to play a lot of the dime position, especially around goal line. And he's out now. Okay, he was a 5-year vet. Nick Vanette was injured on Monday night, out 2 to 4 weeks with the knee. Adam Troutman has an injured foot, but not a major injury. They're saying it's multiple weeks out. Again, that has not been confirmed by the club. That's just by, again, media reports. And then Ken Crawley's injury is not supposed to be serious. He could be back for week 1. So injuries have played a real factor, like a lot of teams right now, when you start talking about the Saints. You add that on top of, again, the COVID-19 restrictive cap because of the losses there. The Saints already having a situation where they had a lot of dead money they had to deal with. So they let a lot of veterans go. And a little different football team than maybe what we were accustomed to seeing over the last couple years. And the final 53 that's going to be coming up on Tuesday is probably not going to be the final 53 because of so many positions where there is a position of need in terms of bringing in another veteran or two to shore up those positions.
And also, without a 4th preseason game, you have extended time from the cut down until the opener. So they have more time to work guys out to see who fills in well and who doesn't. So I think you'll see a lot of turnover from that initial 53 on Tuesday until opening day. The long-term injuries that you mentioned, I think Jalen Dalton's probably the one that hurts the most. He was going to be a big part of their rotation, might have even started while David Onyemata is going to miss the first 6 games and would have been a factor all season long. So that one hurts. Unfortunately, it's at perhaps the deepest position on the team on the defensive line. They have a lot of versatility there. So I think they can withstand that, but that's a good player who's not going to be available. Poole is a guy who's probably going to play a lot of snaps, as you pointed out. There's been so much focus on the cornerback position, and rightfully so, with some uncertainty there. The safety position's in pretty good shape. But that's one spot that now they have to kind of adjust and see who's going to fill in that role.
P.J. Williams, right?
He would be the most likely candidate at this point. So that's an adjustment they have to make, but again, that's one they can withstand. The tight ends will be back pretty soon. They may want to bring somebody in to give them some options going into the season opener. But fortunately, that's not going to be long-term for them. And Crawley, they certainly hope is not long-term because he was having a good camp and is probably going to start the opener regardless of whether Marshawn Lattimore is there or not.
Let's start off with the quarterbacks. I think to everybody that watched the game on Monday, you've seen almost every single practice. Jameis Winston has won the job now. Do you feel that way, first of all, that this is Winston's job? Now, again, you wrote an article this week talking about that Peyton's going to make the comments about naming the starter when he's ready to name the starter. But do you believe it's Winston at this point?
Yeah, I think it is. I wrote at CrescentCitySports.com that, Sean Payton has a lot more data to sort through than we have, even those of us who have seen a lot of practices. And so it's not surprising he might drag on a little longer and not be wowed simply by 1 quarter on Monday night by Jameis Winston. He has another preseason game if he chooses to factor that into making a final decision or at least an announced decision. But no, I agree. I think Jameis Winston has clearly won this job. I suspect it will be made official some point after Saturday's game, maybe early next week. He has been outstanding, I think. From the first moments of the first training camp practice, he looked outstanding. That first day was nearly perfect. He was confident, he was decisive, he was accurate. Now, he's had some hiccups along the way in practice. He had one red zone day, particularly, that was not great. And Taysom Hill, to his credit, has done a good job. This isn't a knock on Taysom Hill. It's just a situation where Jameis Winston has been better and looks like he gives the Saints the best opportunity to win at this point. That's my opinion. That's the opinion of a lot of people. I'm pretty sure Sean Payton's going to concur with that, but until it's official, it's not official.
Right. We'll say this. What surprised me about Taysom Hill in the preseason was not using every tool in his toolbox. I mean, look, there was a question, and a legitimate question a couple seasons ago, whether he could be a pocket passer. He's not Drew Brees. He's not Jameis Winston. He's Taysom Hill. And he is at his best when he is putting pressure on the defense with his legs. I'm not saying he has to run every play. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, again, the ability to roll out, throw the ball, and make the defense have to make a decision on whether they're going to come after Hill or they're going to stay in coverage. And he didn't do that this preseason. Did he do it? Now, again, practice is different because you're not touching the quarterback. But was it something he was doing in camp to be able to, again, maybe extend plays that we didn't see him doing in the two preseason games that he had to showcase his skills as a quarterback?
Well, the interesting thing about it is he talked about this. He was asked about it before the Ravens game, and he was saying that, in practice, he wants to give the play the opportunity to succeed. And so he doesn't want to just take off and run in practice because that doesn't really accomplish as much as going through the progressions, having the receivers stay on their routes, find the right receivers, deliver the ball. So it made sense to not run so much in practice, but then he was asked about the games. He says, no, in the games, I'm going to play it like a game. We need to make plays, move the chains, do the best we can do on offense in the games, but he hasn't done that in these first two games. I don't know if the coaches have asked him not to do that. I don't think they would.
Why would they?
The only thing I can think is maybe, even if it's subconscious, maybe he's a bit hesitant to do it because he does think he has to prove that he can stand in the pocket and deliver the football. Everybody knows he can run. He doesn't need to prove that. Maybe he feels a need to prove he can do the other stuff where most of the question marks have existed.
But I think it hurt his opportunity to be able to grab the number one job. His biggest attribute is his ability to be able to be mobile and to put pressure on the defense with his legs, and he didn't do it. And then a lot of times he looked like a deer in headlights, holding the ball too long, and when he decided to run, it was too late at that point, and again, he was getting caught for sacks or having to throw the ball away.
Yeah, and like I said before, I don't know if it's a conscious thing or a subconscious thing, but I do think in some fashion it is weighing on him, trying to find that balance between being the playmaker he has always been and also being a prototype starting quarterback in the NFL. But he's not a prototype starting quarterback. If he becomes a starting quarterback in the NFL, he will be an exception to the rule. And you're right, that's his strength. And maybe if he'd cut it loose a little bit more, he would have created a more favorable impression. However, I don't think that would have changed the outcome. Jameis Winston has just been that good.
We talked about it all off season, right? That again, if it was Taysom, the offense was going to change some because of his mobility. Then if it was, again, Winston, who was a pocket passer, who's going to go through his progressions. And it just didn't come to fruition, at least in the games it didn't. With that said, if Jameis is the starter, as we both believe he is, I don't think it's over for Taysom Hill here as far as the ability to back him up. If something, again, it's not like Drew Brees in the past where you're going to let Brees kind of, go. If Brees is having a tough day, Brees is going to be able to get through it. They go through a couple games where Jameis is turning the ball over. And I can see a hook here and going with Taysom Hill. So the body language that he displayed on Saturday was one, the guy that just felt like he just lost the job almost, at least from my standpoint. And my feeling is, hey, guy, keep your head up because it's not going to be Book. I don't think Simeon's going to be on the team at this point.
Right.
So you're the number two guy, even though you may be playing that jack of all trades role. Would you agree that there's going to come a time in this season where he's probably going to get a chance to be quarterback again?
Yeah, this is far from over.
Right.
And beyond this season is wide open.
Right.
In
They're both
a
on one-year
variety of
deals.
ways. Right. And so I think his mindset is going to be determined by whether he thinks after this season, whether he thinks he's ever going to have another chance. But as far as this season, yeah, he's still very much in the mix. Monday night, it was like that first quarter was so electrifying with the two passes to Marquez Callaway.
Yes.
Winston only had one incompletion. The first team offense minus Alvin Kamara was just clicking.
Yes.
It was just great. And then when Winston went out and a whole bunch of starters went out, I think the whole dome just kind of took a breath. And it was kind of like the second unit went in there. And I just think the energy level went down, and instead of Taysom raising that energy level back up with his play, I think he sort of got sucked into that. And that was partially because the people around him were not as good as the people who were around Jameis. And there was a huge drop-off, but I do think Taysom played better as the game went along.
I did too.
He made some plays in the third quarter. And so it wasn't a disastrous performance for him, but he had an average performance coming right after Jameis had a nearly flawless performance. But if he's not going to be the starter, you would assume he's going to go back to that other role and still have an impact on the team. And like you said, there could be a hook for Jameis at some point. There could be an injury. There could be team struggles where they need a lift. There are a variety of ways he could still get into the game as a quarterback this season. So I don't think he will, and he shouldn't hang his head. This is far from over.
Yeah, I would agree. The other part of it is when you look at now, being the Swiss Army knife, the jack of all trades, he's embraced that in the past with Breeze here. Does he embrace it as much now as he did in the past, considering this was a legitimate quarterback race, and he wants to be a quarterback. Now, he's getting paid as a quarterback, $11 million a year, for this one season. Do you anticipate any hiccup there, or is he going to be a good soldier and go back to doing what he needs to be able to do to again, make this offense a successful offense, which is being that Swiss Army knife?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a challenge for him, as it would be for anybody, because this is the first time he spent the entire offseason focusing on being a quarterback with the hope that he would be the starting quarterback. He even said that he didn't focus on bulking up as much because he didn't expect to be blocking as much. He wanted to be more like a quarterback than a tight end or an H-back. That's a concern for me. Okay, I'll be honest. And I've said that since the offseason when he first said that, he wasn't working out again and bulking up top. So he could be more of a quarterback and have the ability to be able to throw the ball without being more tightly wound. But now he's in a situation where he's got to maybe be more of a tight end, more of a running back, more of a wide receiver in the slot. Is his body going to be up to it based on what we saw at BYU, where, again, he was injury-prone there? Yeah. Well, he did say that it wasn't a dramatic difference. It's not like he shed 20 pounds or anything. It's not a huge difference. I think he can still mostly handle the role he's had in the past. Maybe he's a little more of a pass catcher, a little more of a runner, a little bit less of a blocker. I don't know, but I don't think that's a major concern. I think it's more of a concern psychologically. Yeah, I think he's a team player. I think he's a selfless human being. Yes, I agree. I think he will take the attitude, I gave it my best shot. I'm going to do my best with the role I now have. I know I can thrive in that role. I'll do my best, and when they're ready for me to do something else, if that time comes, I'll be ready for that. Yeah. Now, that's easier said than done, but I do think his mind will be right regardless of what the circumstances call for. At this point, I got to believe Ian Book's number 3. Now, again, the ESPN crew was saying that the Saints were the Saints had phone calls about Book, teams wanting to trade for Book. Whether that's true or not is really of no consequence. Peyton seems to like him. I don't think you can put him out on waivers or on the practice squad because he's going to get snatched up. And at this point, if you were to cut Simeon, there's a good chance if something happens down the line, he's going to be there. Yeah, I agree with all of that. Sean Payton definitely likes Ian Book. I think he feels like there's a future in New Orleans for Ian Book. I don't know if it's as soon as next year, but perhaps in the not too distant future. I think that's someone he wants to develop. I think Ian Book has shown that that belief in him is warranted, and I would be stunned if Ian Book weren't on the 53-man roster to start the season.
Yeah, as would I. When you look at the strength of this offense, I mean, you could go a lot of different ways, but to me, it's the offensive line. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think it is. The one caveat is there are a handful of positions on this team that are going to be critical to whether it's an average team or a really good team. One of the foremost examples of that is right guard, is Cesar Ruiz.
Yes.
Here's a guy who came in as a backup last year, had a difficult time transitioning because he didn't have a normal offseason to prepare for joining the NFL. He looks like he has made progress. I think he's up to handling the job, but there are probably going to be some growing pains at that position. And so I don't think he's a weak link, but I think he is an uncertain part of what could be an outstanding offensive line. But I do agree that's the strength of the offense. It can be one of the best in the NFL if Ruiz is up to the job, and I think it's still going to be above average even if he struggles.
Interesting that you say that, because if he's not up to the job at guard, he was drafted as a center. I know McCoy has really turned into a really good center for this team, and you don't want to be making a transition to a new center with a new quarterback. I mean, but at the same time, we know McCoy, when he was brought in, he was drafted as a guard, right? You know, so why not flip-flop those guys in training camp instead of staying with the status quo? Nick Easton is no longer here.
Right.
And he was a guy you could count on. If one of those guys went down to guard, he seamlessly fit in.
Yeah, they made a decision in the offseason, and I'm sure a lot of thought went into this, and they determined, let's leave McCoy where he is. We've seen enough from Ruiz to think he can make the transition to guard, so let's put him at guard and keep him there. Now, whenever he or the coaches were asked in training camp about him being a guard, he said, no, he's a right guard right now. No, there was always like a right now.
Yes.
So making a change there is not out of the question. I don't think they want to do that this far into a season.
Yes.
So I think that would be sort of a last resort. I do think the expectation is that those two are going to be fine as starters, and they're going to stick with McCoy and Ruiz, and they'll be okay.
Right.
Now, they do have Will Clapp, who's not necessarily ready to be a starter in the NFL, but he's been here a few years.
Yes.
He can play guard or center.
Right.
He gives them a lot of latitude if something develops where they have to make a change on the interior. It maximizes their options there. So that's helpful if a problem develops. But I think that they're pretty confident that Ruiz is going to be okay, and McCoy has kind of proven himself to this point.
Wide receiver, again, with the uncertainty of Michael Thomas when he'll be back. Harris with the 2-game suspension for the DUI in Baltimore. And by the way, you brought that up on the radio show, and I wasn't aware that it was going to be 2 games, but it is 2 games. Whenever the NFL brings that down, and Traquan Smith again often injured, hasn't been on the field. So when you're looking to cut down to the final 53, or at least we say the final 53, Callaway obviously is your wide receiver 1. But then you got Humphrey, Hogan, Montgomery. You got Baker, the rookie, and you got Winston, who's done a little kickoff return and punt returns. Where do they go? Do they go with the veterans of Humphrey? Of Hogan and Montgomery, along with guys with upside like a Humphrey? We know Callaway's in. How do they play that on wide receiver now, especially knowing that at least for 2 games you're out without Harris? We don't know when Smith's coming back. They say he's going to be ready for the regular season. And who knows when Michael Thomas is going to come back and what type of play he'll be back when he comes back.
Yeah, wide receiver is probably the most fascinating group at this point in getting ready for the season, because there are so many question marks there, and yet I think they're going to be okay. You're right, we don't know when Mike Thomas gets back. They're hopeful maybe sometime in October.
Yes.
We'll see. Traquan Smith, it's unfortunate that he's had another injury. This is 4 seasons, 4 different injuries that have limited to him. He entered training camp as probably the favorite to be the number 1 guy while Thomas was out.
Yes.
And now he's just kind of in the mix. and we don't know where at this point.
And can you really trust him because he's so injured all the time?
No, you can't for the long term. Now, for the most part, he's missed 3 or 4 games, played through an injury for some games, hasn't really missed an entire season, but still, you would like to see him healthy for an entire season.
And he was counted on this year as well.
They were counting on that. Now, Callaway, you know, if he winds up being the #1 guy, and that seems quite possible now, I think he'll be good. He was impressive last year. You know, to me, he looks like a gamer. You know, last year, wherever they put him, I think it was the San Francisco game, he made 2 plays on special teams. When they put him in as a receiver, no matter what role they gave him, he produced.
Yes, he did.
And he's been probably the MVP of the preseason. So he's a big positive. Little Jordan Humphrey, I think, is probably going to make this team. He's had a good preseason. He's made some plays in the past, been in the system. I don't know if they keep both veterans in Hogan and Montgomery. They could if they're a little uneasy about having so many young guys. But if it winds up being an either-or situation, even though they're somewhat different styles, I think Hogan might have the advantage because he looks like a guy on 3rd down who's going to get open, catch the ball, move the sticks. He's not going to stretch the defense, but he has a good role to play. Quan Baker has shown a little bit for a draft choice. I think he's more of a practice roster guy.
I agree.
Most likely. And then the guy they signed from the Bears, the former
Kevin White, which is probably his last hurrah this week if he doesn't get it done.
Yeah, I would expect that he would get a lot of snaps.
Yeah, me too.
Saturday night, because this is it. If he's going to do anything, you have to see it Saturday night.
Here's, and a lot of the folks in the audience know this, the caveat to all that, and this goes for every position on the team for guys that are on the bubble. If you're a vested veteran, the team doesn't think you're going to be here for the full season and contribute, more than likely they're going to cut you and try to bring you back the following week. Because if you're on the team on the first game of the season, then you're vested for the entire season. You get your salary for the entire season. So to your point, when you're talking about Hogan and Montgomery, if you're not going to keep both for the entire season, their contracts become guaranteed. So it'll be interesting how that plays out, at least in week 1. Now, they might have a chance to bring somebody back, but there could be a chance. This is across the board with veterans that are on the bubble. We see this every year.
Yeah, and that's all true. You're right, and that's a risk they may have to take.
Right.
With a lot of players on the roster.
More than in the past, right?
Right.
Because you pretty much knew who your team was in the past.
There are more positions up for grabs at the end of August than there have been the last 4 years. The interesting thing about Hogan and Montgomery compared to, you mentioned Ian Book and you know maybe Quan Baker even in that regard, younger guys, is you're reluctant to expose a younger guy because somebody may say, hey, this guy may become something. Let's grab him. Whereas Hogan and Montgomery, I don't know that they jump out at anybody. You know, Hogan was playing lacrosse, a while back, and he may still be there at some point. Montgomery might still be there. So I don't know that they are as likely to be claimed as younger guys are to be claimed. And I think they could withstand losing some of these veterans if that were to happen. But you're right, the financial considerations also come into play.
Especially now. Again, they got about $12 million under the cap right now. And we're going to talk about this again after we come back from our break. On the defensive side, they got to get another cornerback, maybe 2. So there's some other positions where they got to shore that up. And it may be a situation where, because of where they are on the waiver wire, and this happened this week, they were trying to get tight end Khalil Waring from the Texans, who was cut. He ended up going with the Patriots, who were 15th on the waiver wire selection. It goes by your draft, by your record and where your draft order was last year. The Colts wanted him as well. They were at 21. Saints were at 28. And the Saints are going to be at 28 all season long when it comes to the waiver wires. So it's going to be hard for them to wait to see, to go through 27 teams and then to take what's left over there. If they see a player they like, even a veteran guy, they may have to go out and spend a draft pick to go out and get that player. And that's in a year where maybe you want to be able to hoard your draft picks. But I can see them giving up 7th round, 6th round, 5th round picks, maybe even a 4th round pick to get a veteran they know can come in and shore up a position. And I think that's something you're going to see within the next few days between now and Tuesday on the final cutdown.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the situation with the tight end just drove that point home to them. They already knew it, of course, but that just demonstrated that they're not going to be able to get everybody they want because of their positioning in the waiver order. So and you see that a lot at the end of training camp, and they've gone all the way back to Mark Semino and some other players they've done over the years. They've gotten some good players without giving up high draft choices. And so if another team's going to cut somebody and they can get a 6th or 7th round pick, they're going to do it. Absolutely. So, and if you're higher in the pecking order, like New England was, for instance, you're going to be reluctant to give up something to get a guy because you think you're going to have first crack at him. So they may have to do that, and that could be a good way of doing it. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a concern for them if they have to do that.
Right. And you know, the other part of it is, again, you're looking at a situation where you have some legitimate openings on this roster that you have to fill. And they're going to be backfilled by more than likely guys that are veteran players, okay, that you can count on week in, week out. Not a young player that you have to groom going forward. I'm sure there will be some of those, pardon me, but it's going to be somebody who can be an instant impact player for you. You know, I think that's got to be the direction they're going to go.
Yeah, well, let's look at cornerback as an example. Okay, you're not going to go to a young guy. You have Paulson Adebo, a draft choice. You're not going to find a young player as good as he is. He might even wind up being a starter before the year's out. So if you have a veteran out there who's proven he can play corner, you go get him if you think he's better than Ken Crawley and put him out there. But, you know, you're not going to go get a younger player if you have a younger player that you think is going to develop.
Great point. Les East of CrescentCitySports.com and Saturday Down South is our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll hear from our underwriters. We'll come right back. We'll continue talking some Saints into the next block, and then we'll talk some LSU and Tulane as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Stick around.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Les East of CrescentCitySports.com, and also Saturday Down South is our guest. We continue our conversation about the Saints as they prepare for the final cutdown. Last preseason game is on Saturday in the Dome against Arizona, and then, of course, the final cutdown is by Tuesday, I believe about 3 o'clock. But normally the teams are going to start shedding players shortly after the preseason game ends. All right. We talked about the offensive line, the wide receiver position. Running back, a little bit in flux here as well. We know Kamara hasn't played at all in preseason and shouldn't. But all of a sudden, Jones is looking pretty good. Washington is Washington. Every time he hits the field, he's doing something good for this team. Whether it's running, catching the ball in the backfield, or blocking. And we know he's a core special teams player. The question is with Latavius Murray and Devonte Freeman. I've got to ask you, because you've seen practice, Murray looks slow. Murray looks doesn't look like he's had that burst that he's had in the past, at least in the couple of games. But it's games, and it's a veteran player who's been through the rigors. Are you seeing that in practice?
No, in fact, I said to someone at the game the other night that it wouldn't surprise me if Latavius Murray were on the bubble. He's approaching that stage where running backs have a very short life expectancy.
Yes.
Tony Jones Jr. has looked really good. Had the fumble in the first game. I think he dropped the pass Monday night. So you're not totally confident in him, but he looks like a guy who can run the ball well. Devonte Freeman, I don't know that he's any different than Latavius Murray. I think you would stick with the guy who's been in your program. Dwayne Washington is a guy you do not want to cut. He has too much value on special teams, and like as you pointed out, when he does get those chances as a running back, he produces. So you could see now, and do they carry 3? Do they carry 4?
Because you're still going to carry Armar as the fullback.
Right. So are you going to carry 4 halfbacks and a fullback? Not normally, but you maybe could do that when special teams are factored in. So I don't know. I'm not prepared to say Latavius Murray can't be on the team and a contributor as he has been the last couple of years. But I'm not certain of that. I think he is on the bubble, and I think it's because of young players like Dwayne Washington and Tony Jones Jr.
$3 million salary for him, $1 million post June 1st if you cut him, okay? That's $1 million in dead money. My only question would be, is Jones the physical back that Murray is? And I think if you cut Murray, you don't have that physical back. I think the Jones mirrors more of a Kamara than he does a Murray. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he can be physical, but I think you're right. He's not as physical as Murray, and the Saints, you can go as far back as Mike Bell, if not farther than that. With and the one before that, I'm drawing a blank on his name. They've often had a third halfback who is sort of the bruising type back. Sean Payton seems to like that. Murray fits that role, and it would be difficult for them not to keep Latavius Murray, but I do think the circumstances, the salary, the age, the young players, all will be taken into consideration, and I think it's uncertain what's going to happen with him.
You mentioned that we mentioned the tight end position. Obviously, Troutman, Vanette, both guys are hurt now. Both guys expected back within a few weeks. I don't know if that's week 1, week 2, whatever it is, because again of the they really keep injuries under wraps out on Airline Drive. But we have seen the emergence of Juwan Johnson. Is it legitimate?
Yes.
I think it is.
Yes. And to finish up, Aaron Stecker was the other running back I was thinking of.
Yes.
Juwan Johnson is absolutely legitimate. He's had a great camp. He seems to have the confidence of both quarterbacks. I'm talking about the top 2, because he doesn't get a lot of reps with the other 2. He has gotten open in practice. He's caught the ball. He's caught the ball in traffic. He made plays in Baltimore in the preseason opener. I think he's a work in progress as a blocking tight end, but he's a willing blocker. But as a receiver, he definitely is the real deal, I think. And I think he's going to have a significant role while those guys are out and even after they return.
Now, Griffin and Wolf still on the team. Griffin has been at the team on and off for a while now. They seem to like Wolf and maybe a practice squad candidate there. But the question is, again, how long Troutman and Vanette will be out. And if they think Vanette is enough of a player to be able to fill the shoes of Josh Hill, and because that's basically his role. It is going to be that blocking tight end. We'll see how that kind of plays out. We mentioned the cornerback position. Crawley is injured, expected to be back. Lattimore, again, looks like his suspension will be pushed back, if at all. They're still working out the particulars in terms of the legalities on whether they're going to not drop the charges, but reduce the charges to maybe a misdemeanor because he's never been in trouble before. And that will, again, will maybe work in his favor with the NFL in terms of when the suspension comes down, how long that suspension will be. But then you've got a Debo who, again, I ask you, and we've talked about it on the radio, if they had to line him up opposite Marshawn Lattimore on week 1 against Green Bay. From just the small sample size we've seen in the preseason games, it looks like he could do it. Mm-hmm. What has he done in practice? I mean, is he the aptitude of again knowing the defense, where he has to be, the ability to be able to cover, covering guys after he's been in practice with them over a few weeks, where guys know each other's moves. Mm-hmm. Talk about his maturation process.
Yeah, I think he looked mature the first time he walked on the practice field in training camp. He looked like a guy who kind of understood what was going on around him and what he needed to do, and I think he's gotten better. Physically, I think we've seen pretty much what we've seen in the preseason games. He's done a good job of covering. He's been a solid tackler. I think he's a very smart player, and he's a third-round draft choice, but he certainly would have been a higher draft choice if he hadn't opted out last year. First team All Pac-12. So he is a very good prospect. If they had to put him out there starting, whether it's opposite Lattimore or Crawley, depending on the suspension, if there is one, if he had to start against Green Bay, I think they would be cautiously optimistic. They would know that Aaron Rodgers would go after him unmercifully, and they would be concerned that some plays would be made. But I think they would also be optimistic that he would know what he's supposed to do and that he would make plays himself even if he gave up plays. And I think he has a relatively short memory, which is important at that position. So that's not what they want to do, but I don't think they would panic if they had to put him out there.
I think we both agree they still need veteran help there. They're going to have to pick somebody up on the waiver wire, or they're going to have to trade somebody. They'll bring some veterans in here. Defensive line is the strength of this team, both pardon me, defensive end and also defensive tackle. Again, you can mask the deficiencies on the back end if you get the kind of pass rush that they're getting in the preseason. If they're going to hound the quarterback like they've been hounding the quarterback, and this is going to transfer over in the regular season, you can live with a rookie corner back there because you're putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the quarterback and not allowing him to go through his progressions. Yeah,
I agree. I think the defensive line and the offensive line, those are the two most important strengths on this team.
But they've built that. They built the team that way, right?
Yeah, they've invested a lot in that, and they've made good decisions. And that's true of most teams. I mean, it all starts at the line of scrimmage. But when you are very good and deep on the defensive line anyway, the way they are, that's a huge advantage. And they are very deep on the defensive line. Now, to me, one of the keys is Cam Jordan. Last year, his numbers were way down. Was that because he was coming off the abdominal surgery? Probably, in part. Is he starting to show his age a little bit? I don't know. If he comes back and has 12 or 14 sacks, this line is going to be extremely difficult to deal with. If he is past his peak and they have to lean more on the younger players, then maybe they're not quite as good. We'll see about Peyton Turner. He looked good before he got nicked up in training camp.
Davenport's health is going to be a key.
It's going to be very important, but it looks like he's going to be very good if he is healthy. Passing on, they signed from the Chiefs. To me, he looks like Pierre Paul physically.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not as good a player, but he's a good player. And they have a lot of defensive tackles, but they also have versatility. I'm curious to see what their third down pass rush package is on the defensive line, because they could put 3 or 4 defensive ends out there and create matchup.
And not just that, the linebackers down. Where we were worried about the linebackers going in, Vaughn, Ellis have proven they can play. Vaughn can rush the passer. Quan is back. That helps there. Werner has lost a lot of momentum because of his injury. I mean, it might be a redshirt year for him this year because of that, but we never know. But you look solid at linebacker now with, again, Demario Davis and the crew, so that helps there. But I agree with you. I think the NASCAR package, they stop the run on first down, they can be ferocious on second and third.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree about linebacker. That group has reduce the degree of concern more than any other group on the team. And I would also throw Chase Hanson in there, guy who's been hurt in the past. I think he's made good plays. He's been healthy. There's probably someone in that linebacker group who's going to play in the NFL this year for a different team because they can't keep them all.
Dow was another one. And McManus, the kid out of Memphis, has flashed in both games. And maybe he's a practice squad candidate. All right. Final question, how far can this team go? Look, a lot of it depends on the quarterback. A lot of it depends on injuries, especially, again, at positions where you don't have great depth. But this is still a talented football team.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good team. Our friend Jeff Duncan canvassed a bunch of us a couple of weeks ago, and I picked 10-7. And I think they lost 5 players before it showed up in print. It's been that kind of preseason. One of those being Will Lutz, another being Patrick Robinson. But I'll stick with 10-7. I think they're capable of that, and I think they can compete with Tampa for the division title. I don't know if they'll win it, but I think they can hang in there.
Right. I think they go as far as the quarterback takes them. Honestly, okay, if they get good quarterback play, I think things fall into place for them because I think they're strong up front, both defense and offensive line. You can mask some of the problems on the back end on defense, and again, having a strong offensive line, you'll have an opportunity for maybe a little bit more time for those receivers to get off the jam, to get some separation from a guy that, again, has a very, very strong arm and can go all 3 levels.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a different type of team. I think you're going to see an offense that has more big play capability but is less consistent, a defense that sets the tone more than it has in the past because it can be very, very good. One last caveat I'll throw out there. Essentially a rookie punter and a fill-in place kicker to start the season. That's just a question mark.
Well, the question for me about the punter is, we know he can boom the ball. Can he have the placement that Morstead had? Because that was key. And then for the kicker is, just let's hope you can get through the few weeks till Lutz comes back.
Yeah,
at that point. That's it. Let's go LSU. Look, it's hard to decipher what's happening at LSU because Coach O comes from the Peyton School of Information Control, okay? With that said, how do you feel about this team going into this season?
I think this can be one of the most improved teams in the country. Now, Max Johnson needs to stay healthy at least until Miles Brennan gets healthy.
Which could be October, maybe.
Yeah, they're looking at certainly the Alabama game. They're hoping in early November, but they're hoping earlier than that. Worst case scenario, I think they're thinking Alabama. I don't think Garrett Nussmeier is ready to lead this team just yet, even though he may at some point in the future. But so I think Max Johnson has to stay healthy. They have to keep the starting offensive line intact. It has a chance to be excellent with the 5 people they have. Some talent, but not much experience behind them.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
It was a real Achilles heel for this team last year. And again, there was a disconnect between the coach and the line. What makes you believe that? Because look, they're all blue chippers who have really not really reached their potential. What makes you believe they can be excellent this year?
Well, I think it'll be continuity. They had a problem last year. You had guys in and out of the lineup because of injuries, because of suspensions, and guys had to move from spot to spot. You can't even, between Jason Hines and Ed Ingram, they've been moving around constantly. Now it looks like they're anchored with Ingram at left guard and the other one at right guard. They're okay at center, and then I think they got 2 good tackles, even without Darry Rosenthal transferring to Kentucky. So I think if they keep those 5 together and they're able to stay in the same position, I think the talent level, the experience level is enough for them to be very good. So if the line is intact, the quarterback stays healthy, I think the defense is going to be great. You talk about the depth on the Saints defensive line, the depth on the LSU defensive line is excellent.
I'll give you the same question. Another position that, again, last year was thought to be a position of strength for the team, but they bombed it out. What makes you feel that this year they'll turn it around? Is it the newcomers coming in, or the guys that came back for another year?
Well, it's a combination of things. You have some older guys came back. Glenn Logan is sidelined right now, but I think he's going to be back fairly soon. So you got a lot of experience coming back. A lot of young guys like Guillory, and they're two. Yeah, well, Mason, as a true freshman, is going to play. And he's turned a lot of heads. But they played a lot of freshmen last year who weren't really up to it. I think those freshmen from last year will be better. The veterans are there, and they have true freshmen, Mason Smith being the biggest example, who can contribute. So I think they can go 8-9 deep with high-quality defensive linemen. And again, much like the Saints, I think the concerns about the linebacking core are less than they once were, with Mike Jones Jr. coming over from Clemson, the junior college of Bug Strong, and Baskerville, and also even they're hoping that Damon
Lewis?
The linebacker. Well,
okay.
Google it, folks.
Oh, yeah. He'll remember it in about 2 minutes. Watch, I guarantee it.
I'll text you when
He's
when
an encyclopedia.
I think their linebackers look a lot better than they did a while back.
Go back to the offense for a moment. Wide receivers stacked. Okay, I mean,
Damon Clark.
Thanks. Yeah, I told you he was going to get it. I mean, I know him all these years.
So you can turn off the Google machine.
Stacked at wide receiver. I mean, they're coming in there. They want to. What they doing at wide receiver? I think they're stacked there. Running back to me is a little bit of a question because Davis Price looks like he's a pretty good player. At Emory, we're waiting for him to come to the show, but we keep hearing things about Kiner and Goodwin, the two freshmen, who are really pressing for time.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch because I could see any of those four being part of a rotation that's very successful. I think they'd like to have one guy jump out. You remember 2 years ago, it kind of looked like there were 3 or 4 guys, and that's when Clyde Edwards-Helaire came out of nowhere and became one of the best players in America. So they would like to see that from somebody. I think Ty Davis-Price is the guy Orgeron wants to see do that.
And you need the playmaking ability of Emory. He needs to, especially this offense with Pete's, being a Clyde, you need him to be a Clyde Edwards-Helaire clone, right?
Yeah.
They talk about Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara. He's got to. This is the year he's got to step up and be that guy.
Yeah. Well, I think they're hoping that he's sort of the Edwards-Helaire guy, but I think he expects Davis Price to be there as the guy who gets the tough yards, and so that they'll kind of share it. But if either one of those guys slips a little bit, I think one of those freshmen could jump up and steal some reps. So, it's wide open. I think they would like to be able to shorten the rotation to some degree, but I think that's going to be something to figure out by the SEC opener. The UCLA game, a lot of guys are going to get snaps, and then the next week got McNeese.
Everybody's playing.
So that's something they want to get figured out by the SEC opener.
I like the defensive backfield. Okay, I think they got the best set of corners in college football in Ricks and Stingley. Flott's not bad as a third corner. Okay, if you got, but then Jay Ward has come in. Looks like he's playing a little bit of that safety. Major Burns comes over from Georgia, the transfer. Todd Harris is a guy that's played a lot of football at LSU. Sage Ryan was brought in as a freshman that's supposed to be one of the next big players there. The safety position is the question mark, but I think they're solid at corner.
Yeah, I think they're outstanding at corner. You're right. I don't think anybody has a better tandem than Stingley and Ricks. Safety, I think, is fine. They don't have the dynamic playmakers that they have at corner, but they have good players, and they have several of them. So if somebody doesn't live up to expectations, I think they have enough guys that they'll figure out the right 3 or 4 guys to run in there. So I agree. I think the secondary is going to be outstanding. Defensive line deep and outstanding. Linebackers solid and deep. I just think you have a new coordinator. You have a mostly new defensive staff.
Right.
You don't
but by design, right?
Right.
And there seems to be a buy-in now.
Yeah, I think so. There was a generational shift there. And they went by design to get younger coaches that they think can relate better to these players. That seems to have happened, but until guys get beat for touchdowns, you don't know how binding that is.
That's
but we'll see. Assuming this is an upgrade in the coaching staff, which is a fairly big assumption, but not unreasonable, I think they could have one of the best defenses in the SEC, and I think they could be resurgent.
Tulane's in the same spot. New offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Fritz has steadily improved this program each and every year. But this is a tough schedule. You and I were talking about it before the show. Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Cincinnati, UAB. In addition, again, the Cincinnati part of the AAC schedule. They could be a better football team, but have a worse record this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. With the schedule they have, I think that UAB game becomes a really big deal in terms of trying to get bowl eligible, because I'm not expecting a win against Oklahoma.
Right.
I would be pleasantly surprised with a win at Ole Miss, but I'm not expecting that. That's a top 25 team. So you really need to get that UAB win to tack on to those conference wins that you're able to get, but this is a good conference, and Cincinnati is one of the stronger teams as a crossover opponent. So it's going to be hard for them to get to 6 wins. They could be 5 and 7 and actually be a better team than they were, like you said. If they were to get to 6 wins and make a bowl game, and I think they would because of the strength of schedule, that would be a great accomplishment. If they go 5 and 7, I would not be discouraged.
Right.
And then,
well,
anything worse than that, we'll see.
They check the box where you need to. First of all, quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay. They have very good running backs. The wide receivers are okay. We'll see if they can take the next step. The offensive line, again, everything I'm hearing is they're really good.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see. And then defensively, look, they lost Sample and Johnson. Which again is tough, but Jeffrey Johnson comes back. He's the anchor in the middle of that line. They get Dorcius from Memphis to come in. He's helped on the defensive line, and then they're pretty good at linebacker with the Anderson brothers. They're not brothers, but the Andersons. Also the other one is Moody, and then the defensive backfield. Brooks is a veteran at the safety position. So we'll see how that. It's not like they're coming into the season with a cupboard bare. They've got players that have played football for Willie Fritz for a few years now.
Yeah, and Fritz talked at Media Day about how this is definitely the best depth he's ever had.
Right.
He's recruited enough classes now, brought in some good transfers along the way.
Robinson is one of them who's going to be one of the starting corners along with Monroe. That's the kid that went to De La Salle. He went to Kansas State.
Right. So they... So that depth is going to be important over the course of a 12-game season, especially with the brutal schedule that they have. So the depth is helpful. I think the key to whether they get to that 6-6 mark might be the defensive line. If they are able to play at a level comparable to what they did last year, even with the 2 big losses, then I think they have a chance to maybe get to a bowl game. If there's a big drop-off there, that's going to trickle through the defense, and that's going to make it a little harder. It's going to put more pressure on Michael Pratt to keep up. But the talent is there, and I think they can do it. And it's going to be fun to watch because this is the most sustained success Tulane has had for a while. They haven't had a high ceiling. But the floor has still gotten them into bowl games. And so I think if they can just keep moving along as a bowl team each year and keep building that depth, I think the program is going to be fun to watch going forward, as it has been for the last few years.
I agree. And that's what I would say to Tulane fans. The record might not be as good, but the team might be better when it's all said and done.
And you get to see the number 2 team in the country on campus.
Right, on campus.
What do you have to go back to, like the 59 LSU team to find something like that? 58, I don't know where they played in 59.
Les, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Eric. Enjoyed it.
Award-winning journalist and, of course, accomplished author with us today. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there are plenty of ways to catch our program now. I mean, literally, again, you almost got to try not to catch the program. We have a rebroadcast tonight at 6 p.m. on LAE. At 10 o'clock on The Deuce, WLAE-TV 2. 9 o'clock on Pelican Sports Television every Friday night. 10 o'clock on WLAE-TV on Friday night. Saturday morning at 2 a.m. on The Deuce. Saturday afternoon on Pelican Sports Television at 5 p.m. Always at ericasher.com. Always on the WLAE-TV YouTube page. And, of course, always on our social media platforms at Eric_Asher and at Eric Asher on Facebook. Remember, you catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. That's weekdays 4 to 6. And you can listen live at ericasher.com. The Anchor app is our app of choice for our podcast. We're on all the major podcasting platforms. iHeart Radio app, TuneIn Radio app. Catch the show there as well. Again, special thanks to our underwriters who make this show possible. We appreciate those underwriters. Please continue to support those underwriters. Also, for Les East joining us today, as well as the WLE production staff, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Will Ingram, Alex Chacon, and the best director in the business, hands down, William Hill. I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll check you out next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports, where we'll be talking about the Saints' final cuts. Looking forward to LSU and Tulane opening up their seasons. Football season is here. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.